limits were and how she probably felt like a lot of closed doors. So I was like, I'm gonna bust every single one open just for her.
Kelly Rowland just stepped into a moment she couldn't avoid anymore. For years, whispers surrounded her, growing louder with every song, every appearance, every look people could not explain. Yet she stayed silent. Now, at 44, something has shifted. The truth is no longer hiding. It is clear and undeniable. What exactly has she been keeping in for so long? Let's delve into the details. A broken beginning. Born Calendria Treen. Rowland on February 11, 1981. In Atlanta, Georgia, Kelly's life was shaped by things that were beyond her control. Her father, Christopher Lovett, had returned from the Vietnam War carrying wounds that never properly healed. He suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and over the years, that suffering turned into something that filled the house with fear. He became an aggressive alcoholic, and the home that Kelly and her mother shared with him was not a safe one. Every day inside that house carried a kind of tension that children should never live around. By the time Kelly was 7 years old, her mother Doris had made the only decision that made sense. She packed what she could, took her daughter, and left. It was not easy, and it was not without cost, but Doris was determined to give Kelly a better life. She was a woman acting out of love and necessity at the same time, and the choice she made in that moment would shape the entire direction of Kelly's life. They moved to Houston, Texas, and started again in a city that was completely new to both of them. Houston was a different world. It was warmer, bigger, and full of people building things. Doris worked to establish herself and create a stable foundation for her daughter. Kelly, for her part, adjusted the way children do, by finding something to hold on to. She had always loved to sing. Even before Houston, she had been inspired by Whitney Houston and had joined a church choir in Atlanta. Singing was the one thing that had always felt like hers, and she brought that with her. It was the thread that connected everything she had been before Houston to everything she would become there. It was through music that Kelly found Beyonce Knowles. The two girls were around 9 years old when they began performing together, as part of an early group that would eventually be shaped into something much bigger. Rehearsals happened at the Knowles household, which was run by Beyonce's mother Tina and her father Matthew. Yes, the household was organized around music and discipline. And for a girl like Kelly, who had grown up in a home defined by instability, there was something deeply grounding about being inside a space that had clear rules. She responded to it immediately. Doris was working hard during this period, taking on whatever she needed to take on to keep them going. The group practiced every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it became harder for Doris to drive Kelly back and forth as the demand increased. A conversation was had between Doris and Tina Knowles, and arrangements were made. Kelly began staying with the Knowles family more and more, until staying there was simply the permanent arrangement. She was around 11 years old when the move became complete, and the Knowles home became her home. Tina Knowles embraced Kelly fully. Kelly called her Mama T, and the name said everything about the relationship. Tina later wrote about what it meant to have Kelly in the house. She described her as a great joy, someone she thought of as her own, someone whose eventual independence she would one day dread because it would mean losing a daily presence that had become part of the fabric of their family. Kelly ate at their table, slept under their roof, and grew up as part of their family. Matthew Knowles eventually took on legal guardianship of Kelly, formalizing what had already been true in practice for years. But even within all of that warmth, there were dynamics already forming that would matter so much later. Matthew Knowles managed the group with precision and with a very specific vision. His focus was sharp, and it was pointed at his daughter. Beyonce was the lead voice, the one the group was built around, the one whose natural presence pulled the room in her direction every time she stepped into it. The other members were talented, Kelly included, but the structure of the group made the hierarchy clear. The girls worked hard together, but they were not the same in the eyes of the person managing them. Even at that, Kelly stayed. After Elektra Records dropped the group in 1995, they kept rehearsing. After every setback, they kept going. In 1997, they signed with Columbia Records under the name Destiny's Child, and Kelly was 16 years old. She had spent nearly a decade working toward that moment, inside a family that was not technically hers, building a dream inside a structure that had been designed primarily for someone else. As she was talented, She was committed. She was deeply loved by the family around her. And yet, from the very beginning, the story she was living had always been written around another name. The foundation had been set long before the world ever heard of Destiny's Child. And the weight of that foundation was something Kelly would carry for the next 25 years without the world ever fully understanding how heavy it actually was. A decade of internal torture. Destiny's Child became one of the most successful girl groups in history. And Kelly Rowland was at the center of all of it. She was on every album, on every tour, in every music video. She wore the matching outfits, hit every harmony, performed every night with discipline and consistency, and gave the group everything she had. From the outside, she was a full and equal member of something extraordinary. From the inside, something else was happening. Something invisible and more corrosive than anyone watching could have known at the time. The group's second album, The Writings on the Wall, released in 1999, was a commercial breakthrough. Songs like Say My Name and Bills. Bills dominated radio and drove Destiny's Child into a different level of cultural conversation. The tour that followed was big, the crowds were huge, and the attention was intense. Kelly was 18 years old, performing in front of thousands of people every night, smiling for every camera, giving interviews in every city. She was living what most people would describe as a dream, and yet, inside that dream, a pattern had already established itself that Kelly knew of. Beyoncé was the front woman. She sang lead on most of the group's biggest moments, and the industry had already made a decision about where the focus would go. Interviewers directed their most important questions toward Beyoncé. Photographers positioned the group with Beyoncé at the center. Magazine covers highlighted her face. Lighting on stage followed her movement. None of it was accidental. It reflected a machine that had decided who the star was and was working everything around that decision. Kelly was not excluded from the success, but she was not positioned inside it the same way. She felt every bit of the difference, and she felt it every day. What made the situation harder to carry was the genuine love at its center. Kelly and Beyoncé were not rivals who had ended up on the same stage. They were best friends who had grown up in the same house, shared the same experiences, and chosen each other in ways that went far beyond music. The comparison that the industry imposed on them was not something either of them had designed. It was something done to them, and Kelly was the one who absorbed most of the damage from it. She could not be angry at Beyoncé. She was angry at something much harder to name. And so, she turned the anger inward instead. She later described the way she used to torture herself mentally during those years. She would be standing in front of a rack of clothes before an appearance and the thought would arrive. Not whether she liked the dress, but whether wearing it would cause someone to compare her to Beyoncé. She would be in a recording session working on a melody and the thought would arrive again. Not whether the song was good, but whether the style was too similar to what Beyoncé might do. Every creative decision became an exercise in anticipating judgment rather than an act of expression.
This isn't my dream I'm living, it's hers. So I realized also in that moment, I got to step up, because if I'm living her dream, then I got to really go for it.
When Destiny's Child went on their hiatus in late 2000, the separation brought the reality into even sharper focus. Beyoncé moved ahead immediately. She appeared in a major film, released a solo single, and then in 2003, released the album Dangerously in Love, which sold over 4 million copies in the United States alone, and won 5 Grammy Awards at a single ceremony. The world did not just accept Beyoncé as a solo artist. It embraced her with a force and scale that felt like a declaration. The music industry had been waiting for this moment, and when it arrived, it gave everything it had. Kelly had her own releases during this period, and they were genuinely successful. She collaborated with rapper Nelly on the song Dilemma, which reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and won a Grammy Award. Her debut solo album, Simply Deep, topped the United Kingdom album charts and sold over 2.5 million copies worldwide. She was acting, appearing in the horror film Freddy vs. Jason in 2003, and she was working hard on every front available to her. By any standard outside of the one she was being measured against, she was thriving. But the standard she was being measured against was not an ordinary one. And she knew the difference between what she had accomplished and what the world was willing to celebrate. What no one knew during those years, as Kelly smiled through interviews and accepted comparisons with practiced grace, was that her private life had collapsed in a way that made everything else harder to carry. She had entered a toxic relationship that consumed her for nearly a decade. The man she was involved with understood exactly which wounds to press on, and he pressed on them. He told her that no one loved her, not her mother, not her father, not even Beyoncé. He tried to isolate her from the people who were closest to her, and in her most vulnerable moments, she believed what he said. She hid the relationship from almost everyone, wearing sunglasses to cover what needed to be covered. Showing up polished and composed for every public appearance, and then returning home to something that was destroying her piece by piece. In 2013, a decade after the worst of it had happened, she put all of it into a song. She called it Dirty Laundry, and she performed it live in Washington, D.C. Halfway through the performance, Kelly broke down in tears. Although the audience did not know how she felt at that moment, they cheered her through it. The song revealed what the decade of silence had cost her: the jealousy, the private pain, the hiding, and the long, slow process of finding her way back to herself after years of being told she was worth very little. It was the most honest thing she had ever released. And it confirmed what everyone who had been paying close attention had long tried to figure out: that the version of Kelly Rowland the world saw was never the whole truth of who she was. Going solo, going quiet. The final performance of Destiny's Child took place in June 2005 during the North American leg of their Destiny Fulfilled World Tour. Months earlier, during the European leg in Barcelona, Spain, Kelly had stood on the stage and delivered the announcement to 16,000 people in a foreign city that the group was coming to an end. The disbanding was officially confirmed in 2006. Kelly was 25 years old at the time. She had been performing since she was 9. The group had been her identity for the better part of her life, and now that identity was gone. And going solo was not a new concept for her. She had already released Simply Deep during the group's hiatus, and it had found an audience, particularly in the United Kingdom, where it debuted at #1. But releasing solo music while still being a member of Destiny's Child was fundamentally different from being a solo artist with no group to return to. The label on every project from that point forward would simply read Kelly Rowland. There was no collective behind her anymore, no shared brand, no fellow members to distribute attention across. Every decision, every release, every success, every failure, it all landed entirely on her. Her second solo album, Miss Kelly, came out in 2007. She worked hard on it and put a real piece of herself into it. The album produced international hit singles, including Like This, which featured rapper Eve, and Work, which was remixed and became especially popular in the United Kingdom and across Europe. The international response to Miss Kelly was positive and demonstrated a genuine fan base that was committed to her as a standalone artist. In the United States, however, the album did not perform the way Columbia Records had hoped. The numbers were modest, but the label eventually made the decision that they would not renew her contract. She was let go from Columbia, the same label that had signed Destiny's Child a decade earlier. The label's departure was followed shortly after by another significant change. In January 2009, Kelly ended her professional relationship with Matthew Knowles, who had managed her career since she was a child in Girls' Time. Matthew made clear that the split was without bitterness and acknowledged that Kelly would always be part of the Knowles family. But the professional separation was still meaningful on its own. Matthew had been the architect of everything she had built. He had shaped her work, guided her decisions, and provided continuity between her childhood and her adult career. Stepping away from him meant stepping into something entirely new, without the last remaining structure that had connected her to the world she had come from. Kelly signed with Universal Motown and began rebuilding. The same year, a collaboration with French DJ David Guetta produced a track called When Love Takes Over that became a massive European hit, reaching #1 in multiple countries and selling over 5 million copies worldwide. Immediately, the song earned a Grammy nomination for Best Dance Recording and introduced Kelly to an entirely new audience, one that knew her not as the former member of a legendary girl group, but simply as the voice on a song they loved. It was one of the clearest moments in her career where she had stepped into a lane that was hers alone. Her third album, Here I Am, came out in 2011 and leaned fully into the dance-influenced sound she had discovered with Guetta. It produced the single Motivation, featuring Lil Wayne, which became one of the most played R&B songs of the year, and earned a Grammy nomination for Best Rap and Sung Collaboration. That same year, Kelly joined the panel of the X Factor UK as a judge, bringing her in front of a massive television audience in an entirely new role. Thus, this moment expanded the public's understanding of her beyond what any album alone could have done. Her fourth album, Talk a Good Game, arrived in 2013. It was her most personal record to date, co-written almost entirely by Kelly herself, and it debuted in the top 10 of the Billboard 200. Critics recognized it as something more honest and more accomplished than her previous work. It featured contributions from Wiz Khalifa and included a collaboration with Beyoncé and Michelle Williams on a track that showed the three women's voices working together again for the first time in years. The album was received warmly, but the conversation surrounding it kept pulling back to the same familiar territory. By this point, Kelly had built a solo discography covering 4 albums. She had sold over 30 million records as an individual artist. She had worked across television and film in multiple countries, and she had established herself as a respected mentor and judge on major competitive singing programs. She had done all of this consistently, without dramatic pauses or public meltdowns, without tabloid crises or career-ending decisions. And yet, the dominant story told about her in most rooms was still the same one. Questions about Destiny's Child appeared in almost every interview she gave. Questions about Beyoncé followed her from city to city and show to show. She was the one whose value was always defined by its proximity to someone else. She continued working anyway, building her catalog quietly, as she always had. The breaking point, Thursday, February 15th, as 2024 began the way most press days do for someone promoting a major project. Kelly arrived at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in Midtown Manhattan in the early morning hours, already fully styled, hair done, makeup set, ready to work. She had a clear purpose for being there. She was promoting Mea Culpa, a Netflix thriller directed by Tyler Perry, in which she played the lead role and on which she had also served as an executive producer. It was a project she was deeply invested in, both personally and professionally. The film was her story to tell that morning, and she had arrived ready to tell it. The Today Show occupied several floors of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, a building that had been constructed in 1933 and had not been properly updated to reflect the expectations of a modern entertainment industry. The dressing rooms inside the building were known among people who worked in television. They were described as small, functional in the most basic sense, lacking in natural light, empty of the touches that most talent preparation spaces now offered as standard. Everyone who appeared on the Today Show used those rooms. That was the deal. Kelly and her team did not accept the room they were shown. The reaction upon seeing the assigned space was immediate. It was not what they had expected, and it was not what they were willing to work with. The Today staff understood and moved quickly, which was their standard response to talent concerns. They offered alternatives. They showed Kelly's team other talent dressing rooms, spaces that were similar in size and set up to what had originally been offered. Next, they showed larger utility spaces used for hair and makeup preparation. Each offer was declined. Kelly's team wanted something better than what was being presented, and the staff continued looking. Someone from Kelly's team then asked who had been given the upstairs green room, which was the most spacious option the building had to offer. The answer came back: Jennifer Lopez. She had arrived at the building earlier that morning to promote her own project and had taken the better space before Kelly's team had even raised the question. There was nothing that could be done about the upstairs room. It was occupied, and the rules of the building were the rules of the building. The staff continued offering what they had, while Kelly's team continued declining. Yannis, the window of time between their arrival and Kelly's scheduled appearance in the 4th-hour guest hosting slot, which was to run alongside Hoda Kotb, was shrinking fast. Every minute that passed without a resolution brought them closer to a moment of decision. 7 minutes before Kelly was due on camera, the decision was made. She and her team were leaving. They walked out of the building, and the guest hosting slot was suddenly empty with almost no time to fill it. Hoda Kotb found herself with a live, a missing guest host, and very little warning. Her team was in panic. Fortunately, Rita Ora happened to be in the building that same morning. She had already appeared on the show as a booked guest, and she agreed to step into the co-host chair with almost no preparation time. She later posted about the experience on Instagram, yet saying the whole thing had been fun. She had been given 2 minutes to prepare, yet stepped in and made it work. The broadcast carried on without the audience knowing the full details of what had happened behind the scenes to make that substitution necessary. The story broke publicly within hours. Page 6 was first, reporting that the walkout had been triggered by the dressing room situation. And by the following morning, it was being covered across entertainment media. But a separate account began to circulate alongside the dressing room story, one that offered a different explanation, or perhaps a fuller one. A source told a reporter at a media outlet that the real source of Kelly's frustration that morning had been the interview that had already taken place during the 8 a.m. hour before the walkout happened. And Kelly had gone into the appearance with a prior agreement, one that she reportedly required before accepting interviews, that the conversation would focus on mea culpa and not on Beyoncé or Destiny's Child. It was not an unusual request. She had made it before. She had every professional reason to make it. She was there to talk about a film she had produced and starred in, and she had spent years redirecting conversations that kept pulling her backward rather than forward. However, the interviewer had not honored the agreement. Questions about Beyoncé's new music came up in the segment, not once but repeatedly. Even after Kelly gave brief and gracious answers and redirected the conversation, the topic kept coming up. She handled each redirection with composure in the moment, giving the same short answer, that she was proud of her friend, without elaborating, without showing visible irritation.
Into country.
So proud of her.
I know, but were you surprised, and what do you think about it?
I'm so proud of her.
Yeah.
So happy for her.
But by the time the interview ended and she was waiting in a space that fell far short of what she had been led to expect, she had been pushed to a point where something shifted, so she left. And the simplicity of that action, after so many years of bearing and adjusting and staying quiet, was what gave it weight. That was the end. A new horizon. By the time Kelly Rowland turned 44 in February 2025, she had been a professional entertainer for more than a quarter of a century. She had released 4 solo studio albums and contributed to 5 Destiny's Child albums that collectively sold over 60 million copies worldwide. She had appeared in films, hosted television programs, judged competitive singing shows on multiple continents, raised 2 sons with her husband Tim Weatherspoon, and had done all of this continuously, without pause. And yet, the framework through which most people discussed her had not expanded to reflect it. In July 2025, she appeared on stage in Las Vegas at the finale of Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter tour. The moment brought Kelly, Beyoncé, and Michelle Williams together in front of a massive crowd, and the reunion was received with excitement. Kelly participated fully in it, bringing real energy and affection to the stage. What she did not do was allow that moment to become the dominant story of who she was heading into, the next chapter of her work. She understood the difference between honoring a shared history and being defined by it. So she had practiced that distinction for years, and she had become very good at it. By December of that year, she sat for an interview with L'Officiel magazine and announced that a new solo album was coming in 2026, her first in 12 years. She also announced a world tour to support it. She described the album as her most sincere work, the most honest version of herself she had ever committed to record, created without filters or compromise. She said she had gone back to the studio and put her whole heart into it, more of her than anything she had released before. She was also set to join The Voice UK in 2026 as a coach. The words she offered to L'Officiel about how she was moving into the year ahead were honest. She said to watch your tongue and watch how you speak to yourself, and because what you say to yourself, you will become. They were the words of a person who had spent a very long time learning that lesson the hard way, through years of comparing herself to someone else, through a relationship that had used her insecurities as weapons against her, through an industry that had decided her value before she had the chance to show it herself. Thankfully, she had come out on the other side of them with what looked a great deal like peace, At this stage of her life, Kelly made it clear that she was no longer interested in proving anything to anyone. Her biggest battle was never with other artists, but within herself, as she finally chose to stop comparing and start owning her own journey. And that mindset gave her a new level of freedom that could be felt in her words and her energy. She also spoke about balancing her career with her personal life, including being a wife and a mother, and how those experiences changed the way she approached success, because she no longer saw success as just charts or awards, but as peace and stability. At the same time, her recent projects showed that she was still active and evolving, including her role in the 2026 film Relationship Goals, where she took on a lead acting role, proving that she was expanding her creative reach beyond music and continuing to build a career that reflected different parts of her talent, rather than staying in one lane or trying to repeat past success. Kelly Rowland's decision to speak openly carried weight, because it showed that growth does not happen overnight. And that even someone who has achieved global success can still struggle with identity and self-worth. And by sharing her truth, she shifted the conversation from comparison to individuality, reminding people that her story was never meant to mirror anyone else's path. She had finally stopped asking for permission. She now carried the uninterrupted presence of a woman who had been doing the work long before anyone was paying the right kind of attention.